Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Michael Varda. I'm joined by Joel Renner, and we are Craft Beer Advisory Services, a market research and analytics firm dedicated to the craft beverage industry. Thank you all for joining this webinar today. We're going to be looking at how consumers have been changing from 2023 to quite literally present day. One little bit about our company here before we get started, as some of y'all this will be the first time you're interacting with our content. We provide research and analytics to craft beverage companies, both in real time on your businesses and your competitors, as well as direct to consumer surveys. And then we package all of that into interactive tech tools. So without further ado, we're going to take a look at what you're leaving with today. First, we're going to look at how consumer motivations have changed from 2023 to present. Then we're going to look at how consumers have changed from 2023 to present, statistical predictions for 2025 and beyond. And then all of you will be leaving with an interactive dashboard and a first look at our new AI agent, Bev, which we are proud to launch today as well. So to give you a strong idea of the actual data that we're going to be looking at today, our main method for the purpose of this presentation is looking at information that is already living on the internet. And we're going to be looking at Google reviews, Yelp reviews, TripAdvisor reviews, Facebook reviews, over 37,000 of them from January 2023 to present day, representative of the entire United States. You can see a gender breakdown there, men versus women, and a sentiment breakdown as well. And one of the first questions that we get when we talk about how we deliver information is, okay, we know that our brewery gets 4.8 stars, we have a great burger, and the IPA is awesome. So are we really looking at reviews for an hour? And kind of. What you have here is an example of how we analyze every piece of information that we extract from the internet. So this is a sample Google review. Harry is from Ohio, and you're taking a look behind the scenes of what our natural language processing is doing. So Harry, we assume that Harry's a male. We see 5-star sentiment. Then he starts to mention all of these other things. He mentions great atmosphere. He mentions selection of beers. He says that Alexa was super helpful at the bar. He mentions beer and seltzers, and he was introduced to Ohio beer culture, meaning that he's new to the scene. All of these different words trigger different categories through our natural language processing. So when you have Harry's experience multiplied by over 37,000, we're able to get really meaningful insights segmented by men, women, families, and more groups that we're talking about today. Look at year-over-year shifts, and then look at some statistical techniques to uncover hidden patterns. Before we get into the content for the day, if you have a question, throw it in the chat live. Joel is here to answer that in the chat live if he's able. If not, we're going to cover it live verbally, but would much prefer this to be drop your questions as you get them. We will address them as they come up.
Yeah, I would just add here, if you have a question, others probably do as well. So don't be afraid to speak up. We want to make sure that you get some value out of your time today, especially during a holiday. So please put those questions into the chat, and we'll take care of it from there.
Awesome. To get things started, we're actually going to start with a game. So I'm going to ask you to take out your phones. You can scan that QR code or go to menti.com and enter that code 97355504. Go ahead and scan that code. You will be taken to a screen that it is almost trivia time. And I'm going to leave it up for about 10 more seconds before transferring to the game. If you do not get it in this very moment, don't fret. You will also see a QR code on the next screen. All right, let's see how many folks we got. Got 29:30, give it about 15 more seconds, make sure nobody is left out of the game. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started with our 30. Here we go. 31, good. Answer fast to get more points. It adds a little fun to it. Which of the following factors did not grow in importance from 2023 to today? Beer, food, staff, or price? Five seconds, and then once everybody punches in their answer, it'll clip automatically. Correct answer is beer. Beer did not grow in importance from 2023 to today. We're going to have a fun interactive leaderboard here as well. And this will be fun here to see it over time. Question 2. Which consumer segment grew the most from 2023 to present day? Families, social gatherers, foodies, beer geeks. If you're just joining the call, we are kicking it off with a little trivia game based on the data. You can go to menti.com and use the code at the top of the screen if you'd like to join. If not, we only have about 4 more questions here. Which consumer segment grew the most? Foodies, folks who are motivated by food. We're going to talk a lot about families too. I'm not surprised to see the majority of the group go in that direction. It is a growing segment. All right. Nice job, Megan. Question 3. What percentage of negative experiences stem from poor first impressions? 10, 20, 30, 40, or 50% of negative experiences overall. How many of them are impacted due to a poor first impression? 30%. That's great to see that folks are thinking about 50% because we are going to talk a lot about how hospitality is one of those statistically trending areas of the future where it is truly going to be a make it or break it experience. All right. Question 4. For those of you just joining, excuse me one moment, which of the following experience factor has the highest projected growth by 2027? Service, entertainment, staffs, family friendliness. If you're just joining, we're kicking it off with a trivia game based on the data set. And we are going to, you can still join by going to menti.com and putting the code in at the top. And if you are not able to join, don't worry. And we will follow up with the rest of the presentation. All right, so service here is the top highest projected growth factor for 2027. Entertainment and events, also one of those that are going to grow. And a bit of a trick question there for myself because I know how the future we talk about, well, we're not getting as many people in the tap room without events right now. And we're going to talk a lot about how events are drivers and who they are drivers for. All right, question 5 of 6. About what percentage of customers indicate they'll return again? People who say they cannot wait to come back. 10, 15, 20, 25%. Correct answer, 25%. About 1 in 4 folks from our data set say that they will be returning. Vote Goat back on top. I believe that Vote Goat was first after question number 1. Question 6 of 6, last round. True or false? Men mention food more often than women. And that is false. In other words, women are mentioning food more than men. We're going to talk a lot about who is mentioning what are going to be the key drivers of visits for not only 2025, but thinking about that and going beyond. And congratulations to Vote Goat here in Sakura for being in our top 3. Appreciate your participation. And now we are going to get to the data and what it means for you. So the what, we're taking a quick trip through time. Through our language modeling, we track 10 experience factors: beverage variety, food, service, staff, environment, entertainment and events, specific beverages, pet friendliness, family friendliness, and price. And these are how they stacked up in 2023. Beverage variety being most important, food following closely behind, service at 40%, making more or less the big 3, and then a relatively significant drop of staff, 22%, environment, and so on. Going to 2024, this is where things start to shift a little bit. We see beverage overall. I want you to think of beverage variety as both the variety of beers that you have, as well as those non-beer offerings as well. So we see that dropped from 66 to 62. It's still the linchpin of any tasting room visit. What are you going to be drinking? But this is where we started to see food shoot up there. We also see staff increase 2%, 22 to 24, and entertainment. So those of you that guessed entertainment on that trivia question of it's going to be trending, yes, it is trending. There are just a couple of other things that are mattering a little bit more. 2025 so far, this is truly up to about last week when we put this presentation together. We are using fresh data as of February 12th, and beverage variety continued that slight decline. Food leveling out there, 51%. Staff increasing. Environment dropping a little bit from 20% to 17%. That's people talking about general ambiance. But then we also see price increase from 6 to 8%. Granted, it is mentioned the least out of all of these visits. However, it is something that we're seeing and tracking closely, the impacts of inflation, the impacts of people just focusing on where their dollar is going a little bit more, and that discretionary income perhaps being a little less than it used to be. And that absolutely is impacting taproom visits. So what we've learned so far, what's more important now than in 2023? Food, staff, and price. So we talked about in that trivia question, the importance of those first impressions. That's where your staff comes in. It's not just about being friendly. It's about the body language. It's about smiling. It's about acknowledgement, understanding that it's probably going to be busy sometimes. You might not get your beer as fast as you always want it to, but training the staff to make sure that they acknowledge people when coming in. We have a little bit more on the first impression idea later on. And then what's a little bit less important now than in 2023? And this was surprising to me because a lot of the times we hear a lot about people, the vibes were great, ambiance was great. Thinking and looking at it over time, it is important. They are a little bit less particular about that environment space. I saw we got a question there, Joel. Do you mind reading that for the group?
Are staff and service mutually exclusive in the evaluation process of reviews?
Yes, they are. So especially for folks who may have joined later, understanding where the data is coming from, we extract information that's already on the internet and mainly reviews, social media comments, and things like that. Staff is anytime when someone mentions a staff member by name. So there is a name library that we have of, I forget exactly how many, 1,000 plus most common names. And then we're looking and tagging anytime an individual human is mentioned. And then service represents efficiency. It represents how quickly you are being served, how quickly are you being greeted once you're at the bar. It's those types of things that are flagging for staff and service. That's a great question. All right, now we're going to talk about the who and the shifting consumer landscape. Who are we looking at? We are looking at men, women, families, social gatherers, foodies, and beer geeks. So a bit of a background on how we come to these particular personas. Men and women is relatively easy. We see Michael leaves a review. We assume that Michael is a man. And then we see Jenny leaves a review. We assume Jenny is a woman. Families are tagged by mentioning kids, mentioning even pets to a certain extent, but multiple people of various age groups. Social gatherers are people who are mentioning entertainment, people who are mentioning events. Foodies, naturally, people who are going in detail about their food. And beer geeks, people who are going in detail about the food, or excuse me, about the drinks, about the beverages, whether that be beer, whether that be cider, whether that be wine. People talking about the tasting notes. So 2023, consumer shifts from 2023 to present. We see men 53%, women 28%. A quick call out here that through our tagging structure, we do not tag people that leave silly user handles. So race car driver 1997 does not get tagged as male or female. And that's why you don't see male or men and women adding up to 100%. And families, social gatherers, foodies, and beer geeks, they are not mutually exclusive. You can also be a social gatherer who is a foodie, or you could be a beer geek who is also a social gatherer. The tagging structure looks dynamically across what everybody views. These are meant to be directional in the sense of we do not want to box customers in. Customers are unique. They truly are fluid across what motivates them. Every individual person is different. So just flagging that out as we're talking about which areas are growing over time. So shifting from 23 to 2024, we're seeing more women, we're seeing more social gatherers, and more foodies. Touching on some of those trivia questions that we started with at the beginning, people who are driven by events, those folks are increasing from 45 to 47%. Foodies, 48 to 52%, and women, 28 to 32%. 2025 so far, when we look at this, we see men moving from 53% to 48%, women 28, it sort of leveled out at 30% there. Families have been stagnant across the entire group here. And I do want to call out, because that was a trivia question where a lot of people said that families are growing. Families probably are growing where you are. You did not answer that question because you thought it was something else. But in the overall national landscape, what we can tell from reviews, this is why there are always limitations of certain data sets. Families have been stagnant throughout this particular data set. That is not to say that families are stagnant where you are at. Families, this is not on the slide, it's not even in this presentation, but families are actually the most loyal consumer type. We do analysis for our clients on what are the factors that are actually predictors of people returning again. And families are the most loyal consumer base. That average percentage of people coming back, overall, it's 25%. Families, it's, depending on the geography, anywhere from 33 to 37%. So families are very likely growing where you are. Families are also extremely loyal. The social gatherer, so people who are event-driven, people who are entertainment-driven, you see that 45, 47, and 45. This is highlighted in green because this is a segment that we continue to expect to see grow. Part of the 2025 so far being at 45% there and not continuing that growth trajectory. It's largely due to this data in 2025 so far being January and February. A lot of social gatherers are typically at the brewery in terms of seasonality, late spring all the way through late fall. So that's a number that we would anticipate growing still from probably near 49, 50% from that 45% mark in 2023. The foodies, these are folks that are going to be continuing to grow. And then beer geeks, we still see a very solid growth here. Not growth, but just level of the consumer base overall. You can count on these folks to be extremely loyal to, more so than the social gatherers and any of the other groupings. So what we've learned so far, groups on a growth trajectory, women, foodies, and social gatherers. Groups with a stagnant or moderately unfavorable trajectory here. Men with a slight decrease. Still want to say they are clearly and obviously the largest consumer segment. So making sure that you have stuff for men particularly, that's going to continue to be a key element of strategy. Families and beer geeks, again, this is all contextual. We are looking at a nationwide data set, and we have a mixture of both urban and rural breweries. So understanding that while these particular groups at a national level may have this particular trajectory, it may not be the case for your individual local market.
And I think before we go on, I think it's really important to think about what you know about these particular groups, and you may not have segmented your own particular groups in this way, but that's the power of some of the data that we have, and we're able to also bring this to your level and where you are with your competitors, so that you can think about where you want to grow and how you can build that loyalty out, so that your base business, you know that you're going to be able to hit the numbers that you want to hit, because you have people that are coming back over and over again.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to put the who and the what together. This is where we get into what are men talking about versus what are women talking about across our 10 factors that we're tracking. Beverage variety and specific beverages are where men mention these things more than women. And as a quick backup here, anything highlighted in blue represents when men mention a factor proportionally more. Anything in pink represents when women mention a factor proportionally more. So everything except beverage variety and specific beverages, women are often leaning towards that. Food, service, staff, environment. Saw a question pop up in the chat. Thank you so much, Joel. There will be a PDF of the slides. It's actually a little bit better than that, not to get ahead of myself, but you all are leaving with a microsite that is dedicated to this webinar. We'll feature all of that in the end, because you're also going to have an interactive tool that you can actually get to and play with the data yourself and essentially get to every number that you saw in this presentation. So hopping back to it, everything except beverages, women are proportionally mentioning more, underpinned still by the number one factor for women is still beverage variety. We shouldn't just ignore the fact that that men like that more, therefore the takeaway is beverages matter to men. That is false. Beverages are also the number one factor that matter to women too, but it's those intangibles and developing those return visits. Women are more likely to mention those other things than men. Next up, we have those same groups here: families, social gatherers, foodies, beer geeks. The green represents when a persona group mentions that factor 10 plus percentage points more than the national average. In other words, they care a lot. They care about it a lot more than other people do. So families, this is one thing that's really fascinating. They mention a lot of things, a lot more than the national average. And that's because it takes more to make a family happy. It's going to be critical that there's food to keep everybody happy while mom and dad enjoy a drink. It's critical that the food gets there quick enough with service so the kids aren't a little too frustrated and get antsy waiting for the actual food. And environment, entertainment, you see entertainment really spike for families and social gatherers here, moving to the right one column. These people are going to be absolutely driven by the events, by the entertainment. And this is where a lot of you folks, you're talking about what's trending. Entertainment is going to be absolutely key for these particular groups: families, social gatherers, and women in particular. Foodie and beer geek are a little bit less exciting. The perhaps most obvious takeaway: foodies motivated by food, beer geeks motivated by, you guessed it, beer. All right, so we talked a lot about certain numbers, and so what now? Groups on a growth trajectory, as a reminder: women, foodies, and social gatherers. And while beverage variety is number one across all consumers, the growth trajectory groups value these other factors more than other folks. So in other words, beverage is still king. It's still important to have variety. It's still important to have quality. But beyond that, the things that are going to be important in the future: food, service, staff. And to save my breath from reading the rest of that list, things beyond the actual beverages, beyond the liquid themselves. All right, so how do I prioritize? We've talked a lot about, okay, there are these a lot of factors. There's this that's important to that group, that's important to this group. How do you make sense of it? And so we're going to talk about those projections now and understanding what exactly is going to be most important. So the statistical method that we use is called exponential smoothing for all of my stats people. And if you are not a stats person, don't worry. We just predict the future using the past by placing a greater weight or more value on recent numbers than the numbers at the beginning of 2023. So we started with the percentage of mentions for each factor across each month, used some statistical packages and wrote some code, placed more weight on those recent trends than the older ones. So in other words, we're valuing the shifts and the changes in, say, the back half of 2024 more than January 2023 to June 2023. And then we have the exponential smoothing results. We have this both for the consumer segments as well as the factors themselves. So up here, trend predictions using exponential smoothing for our consumer segments. The first thing I'm going to call out are the red and orange bars. And that is male and female, those lines that you see in 2023. There's a bit bigger of a gap. And then you're starting to see those converge. By January 2027, you can expect there to be a much lower gender gap in tasting room visitors overall. This is something that, especially when we segment within certain groups, when I'm talking about female social gatherers versus men social gatherers, female leading families versus male leading families, we see this converge already. So this is going to be a trend that we expect to continue to see moving on in 2027. One limitation of the model is it might not be that straight line. It never is. These are just predictions using statistical methods. But the takeaway here that we would bet the house on, the gender gap is going to continue to close in craft beverage tasting room visits. Social gatherer and foodie, that bright green and blue bar, we're seeing those increase. And then families staying relatively stagnant and beer geeks staying relatively stagnant, echoing that if you are a destination brewery that's known for your beer and you're like, well, way more than 18% of my customers are beer geeks, you're correct. And that's going to stay that way. Maybe that's 25% of your customers. This is largely meant to understand where are the shifts at the national level. And we challenge you to think about how is that going to impact you in your individual localized market. So those takeaways by segment, women are poised to grow a total of 31% from January 2023 to 2027. Foodies lead the growth projection, 34% from 2023 to 2027. Social gatherers are projected to grow at a lower rate, but still increase, talking about the importance of events. These 37% of social gatherers, so in other words, over 1 in 3 of social drinkers or social gatherers are mentioning entertainment. So if this is a key segment for you, if you are known for your events, that is only going to grow further. And lastly here, the gender gap will continue to close in tasting room visits, and food will continue to play an increased role. Now we have trend predictions across these individual factors: food, service, staff, environment, entertainment, family friendliness, and pet friendliness. For the sake of readability, we focused on those factors that are specifically important to those growth trajectory groups. Throwing a chart with 10 lines in front of you is a tough thing to read. So we really want to emphasize a couple of things here. We see food naturally about 40%, just over 40% in January 2023, all the way up to potentially 60% in January 2027. When you're thinking about food, you're thinking about maybe your food challenged. There are a lot of different ways to make this come to life. We're going to talk about it a little bit further in the next slide, a takeaway slide, but having something. And I really stress having that idea of something. Be great at one thing, whether that's a consistent food truck, a resident food truck, or you have a small kitchen. If you can be reliable for one thing, that is base one. If you can't achieve base one based on laws, based on your space, allowing local delivery services, DoorDash, Uber Eats, that is the sort of baseline of expectations at this point. And if you can offer more, that's fantastic, because another thing that's not on the slide, it's not in this presentation, things that are going to ultimately generate return customers, food is the second top predictor for those return visits on a national scale. We also see service, that orange line, sub 40%, getting up to what's close to about 50% there on the scale. And that's talking about that hospitality. How efficient are you? And to the question that we got earlier in the presentation, staff and service do go hand in hand. They are tagged differently, where we're trying to track how often your people are getting mentioned, because so many breweries now are taking great advantage of those staff spotlights on Instagram. The familiarity with that particular bartender. You had a great conversation last time. They're working tonight. Maybe I wasn't going to go. Now I'm going to go. We track staff separately to understand potential impacts with that, but service and staff go hand in hand. And this is something that's going to only be more important. Staff here, that's trend sort of matches the growth trajectory of service on its own. And then definitely want to talk a little bit about entertainment and events, because you see modest growth there, the purple bar being sub 20% and then being north of 20%. A way to read this slide is that line in particular, 1 in 5 folks are talking about an event that brought them to the brewery, and it was that memorable that they wanted to talk about it afterwards too. So thinking about entertainment events, you at least 20% are 20% of your visits are motivated by those entertainment and the events that you're having. Family friendliness and pet friendliness, those are going to continue to be important for you if that's what you are known for. That consumer segment is particularly loyal, as well as the pet friendliness crowd as well, is once they know that their 4-legged friend can come along and have a water bowl and maybe a dog treat too, that's going to become a spot that they will continue to come again. So takeaways by factor here, food is poised to grow 35% from 23 to 2027. Service is not far behind at 27% projected growth in the same time frame. Entertainment will continue to growing in taproom visit impact from 16% all the way up to the more north of 20% of mentions in 2027. And then staff and environment, family friendliness and pet friendliness, those are the things that are likely to remain constant or slightly increase over time. Key actions. So summing up all of this data, all of these projections, if there are 3 things that you leave today, and maybe you're already doing this, hopefully some of this stuff is validating for you, but in case you are not, intentionally using food as a tool to reach new audiences. See a question from the chat. When you refer to service, is it just speed of service? It is speed as well as ease of ordering. So the tracking also accounts for, like, this was a QR code and maybe it worked great, or maybe there's an issue with the QR code. We also track elements of, I didn't know where to order, it was unclear, maybe it was bar service and they assumed table service. So we're also tracking things beyond just efficiency. That's a great question. So intentionally using food as a tool to reach new audiences. Beer pairings is probably the single most low-hanging fruit that I see folks not doing, where it is such an easy, oh, this goes great with our Italian pills or whatever it might be. That tab just went from $8 to $20 like that. Really making it easy, setting helpful defaults for people. What I mean by that is on your menu, particularly if it's a printed menu or an electronic menu, having those recommendations so easy where they don't have to think about it themselves. Truly the single most underutilized, low-hanging fruit piece to not only promote your food and get more positive social content for your food, but just ultimately bring those folks coming back. The other thing here, go ahead, Joel.
I wanted to add in here, I think that something that most of you, if you have food, are doing is putting down the recommended beer for that food. But what we don't see is if somebody says, "Oh, I'm just here for the beer," that you don't have the recommended food underneath on the beer menu as well. And that can sometimes hurt that. Oftentimes, somebody will ask for a food menu after they see someone bring it out, but there's other times where they don't. And so just to simply have that underneath on the beer menu as well, if you have it, is great. You can also call out when you have a food truck coming. So, hey, if it's Friday or Saturday, this goes great with the food truck, and use the name of that food truck. That is not only advertising for when you do have different or extra types of food, but also that you're thinking about what the menu of that food truck often will have and how it aligns with the beer that you're sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. People often advertise food trucks. We have this truck, but doing that joint marketing, raising awareness for both products, ultimately leading to higher tabs. All right, number 2 here, offer and/or increase variety of beverages. This is something that is important. We didn't talk a lot about it in terms of the trends because it is literally the number one most important thing. And it's always going to be the number one most important thing if I had to bet my money on it. Women statistically prefer non-beer options more than twice the amount men do. We do countless research reports throughout the year, and they almost always show cocktails, wine, cider, seltzer, 2X and 3X favoring women in terms of overall preference. And then entertainment and events are also going to touch on that too. Bullet point number 2, variety in beverages going hand in hand with entertainment. Thinking about that joint marketing that Joel brought up again. Maybe you have, I wouldn't go as far to say an event-specific beverage, but maybe you have an event-specific flight. One of my favorite local cideries for the July 4th, they have a red, white, and blue flight where you can truly have an event-based drink. We talk a lot about occasion-based drinking. It's an easy way to capture the moment, have those customers coming for a particular reason, and then largely, there are more posts of that red, white, and blue cider flight than perhaps any of the other regular ciders that they pour out that are all delicious. So thinking about ways where you can not only promote one thing, but also pair it with another, particularly something that's going to be trending in importance. Lastly, remove barriers to efficient service, master first impressions. We talked a little bit about this earlier. Body language, eye contact, smiles, training your staff. It sounds so simple, right? Like first impressions are important. You think, okay, yeah, of course. But truly, 33% of these negative experiences overall come down to that first 15, 20 seconds, giving somebody a warm welcome. It doesn't have to be fake. It doesn't have to be inauthentic where maybe they're the first one to walk into your tap room that day. You don't need, oh my God, like, welcome. Thank you so much for coming in. It's a simple, hey, how you doing? Make them feel seen, make them feel welcome. Those are the things that are going to eliminate literally 1/3 of negative experiences that show their face on the internet. Lastly here, regardless of service model, make it clear and obvious where and/or how to order. This is a really simple but missed opportunity oftentimes because you're in your business, you know how to order. It's something that you take for granted, but to a first timer, is that as clear as it is to them as it might be to your regulars? That's something there to consider.
I always use an example. I've gone to many a brewery and cidery in my time, and every once in a while there is a spot to line up, and then there's multiple folks that are giving you service. And if you don't know to line up in that spot and you are standing in front of one of the registers and you're deciding what you're going to eat and then the person or drink, and then the person walks away and now someone else is walking up and cutting in front of you or saying, hey, the line's back here. You just spent all that time looking at the menu. That's going to be a negative first impression, even if everything following that is solid. And so if you are really clear so that both your newcomers as well as your regulars understand how and where to order, it's going to take away from that initial, oh, now we got to wait longer because the line was growing while we were standing here thinking that we needed, that we could order shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, Joel. And we are now going to move to the interactive tool, we're going to walk you through how to use that. There's going to be this microsite that you all have access to. And as we mentioned at the top of the call, we're also launching today our newest product innovation, which is an AI assistant custom to your brewery, custom to your business. We're going to walk through that briefly here in the beginning, talk about the journey of what that actually delivers, and then show the complementary dashboard tool, and also see where you can get the presentation slides as well as the recording of today's session. So first, we're going to talk about our new AI agent, Bev. And Bev knows your business, your competitors, industry trends, and just about any other information you'd like to feed her. We heard from our partners that we work with, your information's great, the insights are wonderful, I don't have time to use it. So we engineered a solution where we are still doing all of the research that we do. So presentations like you just saw, if that's the first time you're interacting with us today, we also do real-time brand-specific tracking on your business compared to your custom selection of competitors. That data set is fed into Bev. Your POS data, if you would like, would be fed into Bev, and research like you just saw is also fed into Bev. And Bev is an interactive tool where she's going to save time. She's an evolving learner. She's always trained on that real-time information. A strategist, understanding how you can use or how to differentiate within your local market, rather. Bev is not a solution to every problem that you've ever had, not a stand-in for your team's expertise or human creativity. But after the fact, you can come in here, you can click on this video, you can see how those types of interactions go. And there's an example here of what kind of questions can I ask Bev. There are two additions. One is just an industry level Bev, where you can ask specific questions about how to help out in your particular business, but it's not going to have any context of your specific business. And then Bev Pro or Enterprise, that's custom to your business, understanding how you can differentiate in your local market. So this is a couple snapshots that you can scroll through of the tool itself, where you have that dashboard on all of these trends, as well as the interface of Bev right beside it. And then quickly going over the pricing for Bev here, that Bev General, where it's just that industry trends and our research, we are pricing this on that monthly, 6-month, or annual plan. Annually, you'd pay $20 a month. 6-month plan, $25. Monthly, $30. Bev Pro and Bev Enterprise, they come with a $4.99 one-time data processing fee for us to gather all of the historical information on your business, on your competitors, covers all of the tech setup, and then from there, $40 on the annual plan a month. And Bev Enterprise, the difference between Pro and Enterprise. Enterprise will also get you custom quarterly reporting, where Joel and I or others would be able to come and present on the findings in your particular meeting.
And I just wanted to add here, Michael and I have been really excited about this because over the past sort of 6 to 12 months, we've consistently heard from folks, man, this data is amazing. And even the dashboard is really helpful, but I don't know if I'm going to have enough time to use this data. And so many of you said, I don't really have a data person. I'm pretty good with this stuff, but what are the true insights? And so building Bev upon this data set to help you all out, taking away that need to have some person on your team that is deep into data and can understand is huge, in that you can ask Bev about those particular questions and get sort of a gut check based on either the national trends for sort of Bev 1.0, but also for Pro and Enterprise. What's those deep things across the stuff that you do? So Michael, go ahead with the rest of the demo here.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we're going to get to the takeaway tool for you all, the complementary dashboard, and this is embedded on the website. Fun fact, if any of y'all have ever dealt with tech troubles, Google's whole cloud system went down this morning. So as Joel and I were preparing for this, we're like, oh, great. But it does appear to be back up and running. The only reason I mention that is if you're playing in this afterwards and you are unable to interact with it, you're like, Michael, this is laggy, it's slow. it's actually likely Google. And it's not often that we get to say something like that, but I do anticipate that within 24 hours, there would be no additional issues with that. So there are the experience factors, which I know we've gotten some questions on in terms of how we're tagging each individual element. You can see the description of that there. You can see the descriptions of consumer personas here as well. And then for experience factors over time, up at the top right, there is a little icon that is not presently showing. So I'm actually going to pop over to the backup since we've had issues with the platform today. But what this allows you to do is look at those factors that we talked about over time. We have beverage variety, food, environment, how those have shifted. You can use any of these particular filters to look at what we have talked about today. So social gatherers, foodies, families, beer geeks. If you wanted to just look at beer geeks across that factor, you would click only for that. If you wanted to look at a specific time frame, you would click on that particular month, only a specific year, whatever your heart desires across date, gender, and then those personas that we covered here today as well. I'm going to make sure and see if this has loaded up for us. But there is a, when you are loading this on your own, after Google has resolved some of their issues, there is a very clear button that when you bring your cursor to the top right, that you will be able to toggle those optional metrics. So on the other one we saw, here we go. So optional metrics is right up here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit for folks so they can see exactly what that looks like. Optional metrics, all of the other factors here, and you can very quickly and easily toggle that. And you can see over time how those individual factors are changing. So that is the first. And then number two, this page that we're also giving in the complimentary tool, we take a look at those top 10 experience factors. This is the entire data set. So you have also gender over time, sentiment over time, overall sentiment. And again, if you only wanted to see, maybe I'm only concerned with what men have talked about. And it's going to take that, okay. And if you're running into this where it's taking, again, I would say any more than about 30 seconds, you'd want to go ahead and refresh the page. And typically under normal Google Cloud circumstances, this would be about a 5 to 7 second interaction, but you are going to be able to toggle, and now it is slowly but surely populating the data, and you can see over time how things have changed. The presentation slides for today are presently located in the presentation slides area. So you can go through, and if you were interested in any of those particular charts, you can check that out. And then last but not least, the presentation recording will be uploaded here within 48 hours. If there was a particular point that we chatted about, but were not in the slides and you wanted to go back and listen to that again. There is a link to our main website where you can link to our master website, craftbeeradvisoryservices.com. If you'd like a demo of any of these tools, you can send in that request form as well. And I believe Joel has a link to drop in the chat if you would like to request a demo of either the dashboard or Bev and like to see that up close and personal with your custom data. And any other type of note, you can drop in the general contact form. And with that, I'm going to open it up to see if there are any final questions. And in case not, in case I see some people dropping off already, wanted to thank you all so much for your time, especially on a holiday. Happy President's Day. You can follow us on LinkedIn. We're very active on there with all of our product updates. And Joel and I will hang out for a little bit to see if there are any follow-up questions. If not, thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks, everyone. As you think about the needs that you have, let's set up time to talk and share a little bit more on how powerful this data the dashboard and Bev can look as it is built out specifically for you and for your competitors.